My name's Brad Snyder. I'm AKT, KMP professional, and you see on the right side, which we're going to talk about, SAFE professional consultant as well. Out in San Francisco, so kind of the left coast view. So my background, I'm an enterprise coach. I've been pretty much an enterprise coach for the last 7 or 8 years, been in Kanban and Scrum, Agile for about 10. Both in enterprises and even in startups. We did some enterprise startups. So I've been kind of at that level. I really like this area. It's complex. I kind of might be the antichrist to some of the stuff that you hear from David, although I try to apply the simplicity kind of view of things. So this is where I sit, though, more in the enterprise. There's 3 words up there: methodologies, tools, and pragmatic implementations. I love methodologies. I love David as a methodologist. He offers great things. He stays current. He allows us to come out and actually implement those methodologies well. I also like SAFE. SAFE has a methodologist named Dean Leffingwell. He does great things. Sometimes there's some conflict between the two. And me as a consultant, or you as clients, or you as Agile coaches out there, have got to figure out how it's going to work for you. And that kind of gets me to that third point, which is pragmatic implementation. When you're at scale, when I talk scale here, I'm usually at 8 to 10 to 15 teams. That gets you up to about 125. That's an art, an Agile release train. So it's not small teams. So you have to have some frameworks in there. And that pragmatic implementation says, hey, I may want to implement it this way, but we may have this tool set, or we may have a person in there that's at high ranking that says, we're going to do it this way. Please adapt and move on. So I try to do that as well. So that pragmatic implementation, using those methodologies at scale, and I love tools. I'm not in love with any tool. You'll see, I try to give you some examples. I thought David did a really good job yesterday showing how some of these tool sets, analytics, and reporting can really help you. And it's not a nice to have at scale. You need tools when you're at that kind of numbers, 200, 400, 600 people. You can't have it on a board. It'd be beautiful if you could, but you can't. So that's kind of my lead-in. What I'm going to do today is take you through, do a little bit of an introduction and why SAFE, hit the 3 levels. I won't go to the 4th level: team level, program or product level, portfolio level, and what is a key ceremony in SAFE. It's called release planning. So why don't we keep going? So again, what I'm going to hit is to hit the SAFE aspects of it where you can apply Kanban for scale. And again, like I said, there are other ways you can scale. We'll look at that, but I'm going to try to stay focused on that. So back in 2012, Agile Alliance published a subway map, and it looks a lot like the tube, if you've seen that, or even some of the subway maps here. But it says, look, these are Agile delivery frameworks that are out there. We subscribe to them. We'll help you. We'll give you guidance on that. And you're getting that here with LKU. Here are the top ones. And if you look at the first 5 or 6, Scrum, Iterative, Teams, Lean Kanban, they weren't even naming the Kanban method, XP, are kind of where they are. And you can see through those, the subway maps themselves, the things that you would implement in there, the best practices that are in there. Kind of the ones down below: product management, DevOps, which is hot right now, design and testing were in there. Let's fast forward 5 years later. A group, Deloitte, actually published this, and I love this. I mean, it's an eye chart, but there's a lot of choices you have. You as a client, me as a consultant, and we can use these. And again, a pragmatic implementer says, I'm going to use what is best for you as a client, and will work best. But you have things to choose from. And again, we're going to stay today around how you can apply Kanban method with Scaled Agile Framework. So that's where I'm staying on this front. So just 2, and again, I don't work for SAFE, but I want to give a little bit of advertisement on why I'm up here. Why is SAFE up here? It's a little different than LKU. SAFE announced back really and took root in 2011 and 2012. They came out with this 1.0. They'll say it isn't just a framework. They really said it's a body of knowledge. And what I like about it from day one, if you go out to scaledagileFramework.com, you can go out there now, and it's just thousands of web pages. You can click into each one of those, and it gives you a body of knowledge, and they continue to update it. So you could say, hey, I need, I'm at a portfolio level, I'm looking at this area, what's the best practices? Well, I like 80% of that, but we have a compliance issue. So we can't use that part, but you can use the rest of it. So it's a nice body of knowledge. And so what they've done over the years is taken that to 2.0, 3.0, and LSE was in there. At the beginning of 2016, they came out with 4.0, and that's what I'm going to talk to here. So they really matured that along the way. They've had some reasonable success, and again, this is the only advertisement, I swear. I think David will kill me otherwise. The growth has been pretty phenomenal. In the last year and a half, 154%, 4,000 new members a month. So as a consultant, I'm sitting here going, I love Kanban. I use it, I've used it forever, and I continue to, and you see I'm accredited to that. But if I've got clients that are asking for this, I'm going to oblige, and I actually like a lot of the stuff that's in here. So they're having reasonable success on that front. So let's move. What I'm going to talk to today, so if you go back, they came out with 4.0 in 2016, so it's been out for a little over a year now. They're going to come out with a 4.5. We're going to talk just the rest of the presentation out on how Kanban's in 4.0. And you can see I've kind of hit the where the Kanbans are at each one of those. So at the portfolio level, at the value stream level, at the program and product level, and at the team level. So that's what I'm going to hit today. And I'm really going to stick to the top three, which are really, is at the team level, you're really talking about stories. And you can do that at this level. At this level, you're pretty much talking about features. Stories build up to features. And I'll talk to the top level, which is epics and roadmaps. Now, I love this. Again, you can apply, we see back here, I can apply those Kanbans at each one of these levels. Yikes, I need to learn how to use this thing. At each one of these levels, there's a Kanban, and I'm saying what I'm doing, and you can do, is take the best practices that you're hearing here, what you see in the Kanban method, in the cadences, and operate at the team, starting at the team level, start using this, because this is great stuff. And I'm saying this is what I'll show you a little bit here on how to do it, but this is where I'm saying this merging, this coming together. I've actually poked a little bit at the group here at LKU, and I've poked at SAFE to say, come together, because you really together show a better thing for us to use out here, be a client or be as a consultant. So that's what I'll show you a little more on. So now, the aha moment, I heard it was in here the last presentation. I had an aha moment here. Again, most of my slides are right from SAFE's because I thought I wanted to be true to those. They said, look, SAFE at 4.0 recognized a set of connected Kanban systems. Look familiar? It says, we recognize, and they went down at the team level, which is down here. That's what they really were saying before. They didn't give any kind of guidance there. There's over 400 references in the documentation going back to 1.0 about Kanban, but they connected them. And they, in particular, connected it at the team level. So the aha moment is, hey, we not only recognize Kanban, we wholeheartedly approve it and would like you to use it. And we'll get into that a little more. So that was the aha moment for me. So if we have, if I keep going back, if I have this connected Kanbans, I can use the Kanban method. I know I'm just going to talk to you about the 3 layers. You don't need us. You can go out and do this. This stuff's easy. You got 400 teams together, 200 teams together. This is the reality at scale. The problem at scale, you guys are implementing it or in the middle of implementing it. You've got to implement with audit and governance and compliance. You've got data issues, be that PCI or financial data. This is what you got to do, or this is what we have to do and implement it. So it's really good to have these frameworks, but the reality is you've got to make it work for you. And so that's a lot of what I do at that level when you're talking at team level, or excuse me, at the enterprise level. Dirty little secret. I got 3 of them throughout it. Got a couple ahas too. I call it the big 5 rules. SAFE calls it the rules to operate in SAFE. But I'm saying if you stay on this, and I'll spend a little bit of time on this. Number 1, operate on the same cadence. And this is really at the program level. If you're going to release, and we'll get into this a little more, but you want to release, say, every quarter, You need to operate and let the teams, even though if they're working in Kanban, some are working in Scrum, they have to recognize we're going to release on a quarterly basis. And if you're working in 2-week sprints and say you're on a Kanban and you really only be able to release every 2 sprints or 3 sprints, honor that time period is all they're saying here, which kind of gets to that second item, which says, look, at the program level, where I'm really going to release to market, I have these program level events, which is a release. If I say I'm going to commit, we're in December, on March 31st, I've got a quarterly release, we're shooting for March 31st, honor that, and keep moving to those objectives. Even though you're working in a Kanban, you're at a team level or even at a program level, understand you're trying to get to that objective and things are changing. And you're able to adapt either in your, in a sprint or an iteration or in your Kanban, things are changing, but honor what you're trying to do there and communicate up. The third area is a little tougher to do. And again, what I like to do on this, there's a system demo that's needed. So when you demonstrate your stories in a Kanban or in a Scrum, you're demonstrating stories and you're expecting to be able to demonstrate that in a real environment. At a program level, and if you have 15 teams, you periodically, about the second or third sprint or iteration, want to start integrating. So you can start to see this thing start to come together. So you need to honor that piece as well. We'll get into that a little more. And then the retrospective, which they call in SAFe, and inspect and adapt, do that as well. The last 3 kind of fit together. Use normalized estimating, meaning same thing at the top. I'm going to estimate if I've got 4 weeks to get something done, there's 2-week sprints, honor that and make your 4-week time period. Even more important is honoring that release schedule. You want to vector towards getting that release out. It may have 80% of the stuff you thought you'd have because it was a quarter ago, but honor that. And that's a fixed date where that art, we'll get into that a little more. And integrate your code, the thing kind of up above that I said. Integrate that code, knowing you've got to integrate with people around you, 10 other teams, and make that work. So if you honor those big 5 rules, you'll operate really well and SAFe. So let's move on to that level 1. Before I go further on this, I'm going to take you through a few slides on if you're in Scrum. I know it's a little hierarchical, but I mean, you'll see on the next slide, overwhelming net of folks use Scrum. So let's do a Scrum walkthrough before we do that. And so we're going to stay at this bottom level. And again, what you're operating on really is about the story. And we'll do Scrum, and then we'll immediately come back through and do Kanban. So looking at Scrum, looking at what's that team doing at that lowest level? It's building out stories. Who is responsible? Well, the product owner is responsible for the content, and the Scrum Master is responsible for getting it through the process. So normal kind of stuff that's going on here. Those sprint teams or iteration teams are demonstrating that functionality as they go. So key to it all, whether you're doing Kanban or Scrum, again, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, your user stories are that smallest increment of value. If you have a 2-week sprint, you're trying to get those done in a couple of days, worst case in a week. Those stories stay in those sprints. You don't want to move into the next sprint. And who owns that again? The product owner. They're the ones that are responsible for going on that. So again, that level 1 team, that first level team is breaking those stories down through tasks and building them back up. I call this the snowman diagram. I think everybody's seen it. The product owner is kind of on this left side. They're responsible for the product backlog, getting the planning together, building out and committing to the sprint is the team. They'll do their daily stand-ups, do their reviews, demonstrate, rinse, and repeat. So I talked about these are the primary roles at that team level, a product owner, a Scrum Master, but you have the team that's really the engine in there, the developers and testers. But now think about you've got 10, 20 teams, 10, 15 in an art. I've got solution architects, I've got UI, UX, I've got data, I've got reporting stuff that I've got to handle in there as well. So those are the roles that are working down in that engine, what I call the engine. If that engine isn't working, the rest of this is not going to either. So now let's move over. Say you've decided, and I encourage the teams, they're done with the Scrum aspect of it for all the right reasons, but they're still participating in this and they want to do Kanban. So what's that look like? So what SAFe came out with is they said, look, at 4.0 we recognize Kanban's a great tool. It's an alternative method, although we know a lot of teams are going to use Scrum at the team level. And that 4th bullet, which is what I'd highlight here, are what are the teams, and you've heard this. Teams like integration, maintenance, reporting, the analytic stuff that needs to be done are better suited in Scrum or in Kanban. So they're saying, go do that. And it's not an either or, it's a blend. And so they're really promoting that from that standpoint. So that example before, the snowman, is what I call, you see in the middle of that now, is a Kanban. So same thing, you're participating as a team. Say you're 2 of 10 teams that are working, you're working in Kanban, but you're honoring that process, that 2-week process and that release process that you're going through. I'll spend a little time on this. This I'll use as a baseline. So you can use those Kanbans at the team level, and this would be an example. Story backlog, test backlog, in-process test. So you've seen that. And the good news is you can set those up. They're in there, and not only would you use it in a Kanban, you could be a Scrum team at the team level, and I'll show you with the next slide. Actually, what this slide is showing is, look, I have stories out here. I have a task board. I can see where things are working. If this is a single person and those are the stories that they're working on, what is that? That's a Kanban. So even if they're in Scrum, they're at the team level using Kanban because it's visualization. It wouldn't have to, you can pull this up as well. I could look at all members of the team. Where do they stand? If I'm the Scrum Master, I could look at multiple teams on where they are. So that the tool there, the reason I love the tool in this case, you have the access and the ability to look at it and look at it the way you want. Even though I'm participating in Scrum, I'm looking at my tasks that way. Here's another view, same thing, but more at the story level. So again, using all the things that you're seeing here today, you can limit your work in process, you can see where things are, it's color-coded. Again, a lot easier when you got 10 teams looking, I'm looking at the problem areas. This is, again, a version 1 example of a tool set that you can actually look in there. Now I'm at the storyboard. So storyboard up here versus a task board. Okay? And just another pass. And this, again, using the tool that's out there with that same team. This is Agile Central, CA Agile Central. You can see here, right, I'm limiting my work in process. It's really good. It gives you that ability to use that and still be, even in the case of teams, I'm down at the using a Kanban. I'll flip by this because I'm going to start to run out of time. So again, at that level 1, I could be Scrum, but you're seeing right here, I've got a Kanban working. They're breaking down the stories. They're building them out through the sprints, and if that's a 2-week sprint, then they move along. So that execution's and again, it's a closed loop execution. You've got the daily, you plan for it, you have the daily stand-up, you do backlog refinement, you demonstrate, rinse and repeat after iteration retrospective. So here's the challenge. At these larger areas, and you may be experiencing this now, it's great, this works, this is the engine. If this engine doesn't work, anything above it isn't going to. But do the folks that you're working with care at a higher level? Or are you one of those folks that say, look, this better be working, but I don't really care. I want to know when the features are done. When can I release? That's the downward pressure you're getting there. So that's essentially, but if that, and I keep saying, the team level is not working, the stuff above it isn't going to. So next dirty little secret. I showed you could do Kanban and Scrum at the team level, so at the lowest level. Anything above that is Kanban. It's always been that way. At the program level, at the value stream level, and the portfolio level. So you're not managing, just by definition. Your sprint's 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and you've got a feature at this level that goes 4 to 6 weeks. You're not managing that in Scrum. You're managing it on a Kanban. That's the best method to do that. So that's where you're doing it. It's safe at a higher level. Everything's being managed at the Kanban level above that. Okay, so let's go up one level, that program or product level. So what we're seeing there then is you got a Kanban working here, you got your teams working on the stories here, and the feature is what you're delivering at that point. So same kind of look. I'll keep going. So just like you had the product owner at this level and the Scrum Master managing this, and this is an aha moment for teams typically, you've got a product manager. So if you have 10 product owners down under here in your art or your release, you probably have a couple product managers that are managing those. So they're looking and they're responsible for making sure those features are coming together. So they're myopically looking at those saying, look, if I get those done and I have my PMO or my manager of Scrum Masters that is over here working with me, I'll make sure that those stories are coming out, that I get my features on time. We'll go onto that a little more. So again, there, like what is down here, these features are coming in within the release, just like these are time boxed to a sprint. They're usually 2 to 6 weeks. So if you have 2-week sprints, every 2 or 3 sprints, you might get a feature. A bunch of stories are aggregated, and that's what you get. So again, this team, this program team, is focusing and fixating on features, which is driving behavior downward, by the way. You can still let these teams down below work on their story and task and how they set up. You don't care if they set up as a Kanban or a Scrum or how they work. As long as they're meeting their obligations and you're seeing your features come together, you can manage that. The cool thing, because this is the other side, they say, well, look, now we're scaling. I got to get more people involved. It's going to be more cost. It's really not. I mean, at the end of the day, again, like I said before, if you have 10 Scrum Masters or 10 product owners and 10 Scrum Masters down here, you've got a manager above them. Just normal management hierarchy is in there. So they're there already. If they're not, I'd be surprised at scale at this level. So same thing, an architect has architects here. So you're really, the cost is embedded in there already. And there, if they stay focused on this, they'll actually drive that behavior downward. And the way they do that, second dirty little secret is this. I'll spend a little time on this as well. So if I have 2 releases that are going on here, and I've got sprints or iterations that are going here, so I have sprint 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and I harden. On this left side, what you have is, well, I'll do it this way. It's a little harder to see. I've got 2 features. 2 features, and this feature has stories that are being done sprint by sprint. What you're managing at this level, at the program level, is, hey, I'm expecting these stories to be done. I mean, you're hitting your sprint regs, and you're moving sprint to sprint or iteration to iteration, and I see them being accepted along the way. But at the end of the 6th sprint, I better see all of it come together so I can take that feature and say, I'm ready to go with that. You have visibility to do that. So if you're just managing the feature pieces and they look like they're coming together, you don't need to worry about. The ones you need to worry about are the ones that aren't coming together. Like, say, stories 2 and 3, or just they keep dragging on, they get to 7 and 8, you've got issues there. But if you stay at that top level and you can make the changes that you need to and drive that down, that's a really good thing. But you don't have to be worried about how these teams at that, in the bottom of this that are actually cranking out the stories. If they're doing their job, this stuff will come together. So the dirty little secret is manage your features and you'll drive the behavior down below that. One of the things David said yesterday is don't have dependencies. And that's good if you can get away with it. But sometimes there aren't. There are dependencies in this, and this is a pretty easy one to see. If I want to get to order shipping here, I've got things like the site map, I've got logistics, and I'm having a problem right here. So if you're not having problems, this is saying, hey, the only thing this is lit up, and again, I love the tool, is lighting up that says, hey, I'm having problems with RMA. We need to go focus on that. I don't need to focus on the others. Those came through. They're green. But that kind of view, which I think is excellent, this again comes from CA, is a feature view that allows you to have that access. Here's another. This is a program board that says, hey, and it shouldn't be any bigger than this. I tell teams, if you have a release and you got more than 40 or so features, you'll probably have too many. It's too hard to figure out how to do that. But this view, and again, it's at a feature view, shows that, and I can see this, and they will start to light up when there are problems in there, when you've missed a deadline. And again, small teams don't need to worry about this. Larger teams do. The tool definitely helps on this front. So similarly, that program team is keeping track of the features that are coming through, knowing that these are working so that they can see periodically, and it's not happening every sprint. These features are coming through every 2 or 3 sprints, so it's easier to manage. They're seeing it, and they're going to see if the stories aren't coming through, that they're going to have problems with the feature. They need to focus on those areas. And again, that's typically on a quarterly basis. Just another view. Again, I like the views that just give you the iterations out where things are. Just color coding easy to look at when you're looking at a lot of teams and a lot of stories. So we saw that execution at the team level, and I'll spend a little time on this one. And again, sorry, it's a release. So we're now at the release. The teams are working at this level. It's like for like. So if I have a daily stand-up, or I'm doing planning, we'll get to that, a daily stand-up at the team level, At the release level, I've got Scrum of Scrums or a PO Slink. I actually say Scrum of Scrums for product owners, Scrum of Scrums for Scrum Masters, even for team leads that get together periodically and solve problems like you're doing in the daily stand-up at the release level. They may not meet daily, they may only meet once a week, but they're actually working on any dependencies or issues, or this is really risk mitigation going on at this point. Same thing here, the backlog refinement at the product owner level. At the program level, they have release management. So they're looking at, hey, I'm having issues with these stories or this line of stories. I may have to change my release, my features around and move them around. With that communication going on, that'll happen a lot easier. I'm not saying it's easy, it just happens a lot easier. And these are forced kind of meetings once a week or once a month that you're going to do. The same thing, that team demo I said before is going on. You have a system demo where you want to integrate those 10 different teams worth of work going on, and that's happening. And I'll get to that a little more. That's a little more difficult because it's hard enough for that DevOps team to keep these up. It's really hard to get if you're building out product along the way and you're continuing to build out your infrastructure underneath it to demonstrate and actually test it. It's difficult, but this, by forcing that, it makes this come about. And then last, the preparation for planning. You're doing sprint planning in here, doing release planning here. This release planning is only happening once a quarter. If it's a small number of teams, it could be hours or a day. If it's a large number of teams, it is a 2-day exercise. People get together and do that. So I talked about that art. That art is an agile release train. It's a release, that they come out with, and really, it's staffed similarly, just by numbers, 50 to 125 people. If you think 10 teams of 10 is 100, 15 teams of 10 is 125. That's how you get to 150 is where you get to those numbers, and that's a best practice from that end. So the reason I'm setting this up, you'll see here in a sec, we're going to talk about the release planning, because you've got to come together. Just like you do sprint planning, you do release planning on a quarterly basis with these teams, making the commitment. All right, so I said before that you're going to demonstrate periodically, and this is after the second or third sprint. You want to integrate all that. That team is DevOps. They have an onerous role to do that. If you think about it, you've got 10 teams worth of work to actually integrate, and they're doing that every 2 weeks just after the demos that are being done. To do that, what's the best way to lay that out? And they're doing this ahead of time. It's a Kanban. It works really well. This product is called Continuum. It's a good product. It works with their, it works standalone. But again, it gives them that view when they got to put these together. They know what they're in for. All your demos are done, and now they want to do this system demo. Again, the way that they visualize that is this way in a Kanban. Here, I'll build this out. So, people have heard DevOps as, it's a hot topic. This is our view of DevOps too. I mean, you've got, and really all I've been talking to right now is a lot up in here. They've got a tough job. I mean, and this is why DevOps is a hot subject right now. Because if you get all the development done, but yet I can't integrate, I can't do my automation, I can't do any of this kind of pieces, this is what they're dealing with. So we think we have it hard on the development side. The release management is really what this used to be called, is tough too. So it just gives you an idea from that end. Gonna need to go. All right, so let's move on to release planning. How am I doing on time? All right, 20 minutes, okay. So we talked about team level. We talked about that program level. Now we're going to talk about that release planning that happens. And again, that's synchronous to, you're going to do a quarter release. It's typically what it's either quarterly or every 4 months. It depends on what your sprints are. If you had 2-week sprints, you're typically doing it on a quarterly basis. Some groups have month-long sprints, which I'm not a big fan of. But that's, they do that. You typically then do it every 3 months. So we talked about this. Teams are primarily working at that sprint and daily level. They're cranking their stories out. They're executing. Executives will be executives. They're saying, look, that's all interesting. We kind of look at that team sometimes as the canary in the coal mine. If it's not working, we need to be addressing it, but we're still interested in those features. Because this is what they've basically done. A lot of those executives, be a product, they've said, look, I've made these commitments just on a quarterly basis. It's not a roadmap for 18 months. It's a quarterly roadmap, and you see a lot of enterprise companies doing this. I made these, how are we doing? Did we do all this as we're coming up to do the release of the next release and the planning for it? How much did we hit? Did we hit 80%, 90%, 75%? Because what we didn't hit, we need to either reprioritize it into the next release or not, or drop it and say that really we aren't going to hit that, or go into that release with that knowledge. And so that's what the executives are hoping to see, and because they have to go communicate to the people they've committed to, or to the customers that are out there. So what that does, the second thing you have here, they've made these commitments. Now, a quarter has gone by. Executives may say, I've got a different focus right now. We've decided we don't want these 5 features, or we've had a reprioritization, or funding was cut. Or down here, hey, the team says, you told us to do this. You said we're going to work with this third-party vendor. They never came to the table. We can't do that anymore. So just that periodic resyncing is basically what's going to happen here. I call it planned, periodic, productive resyncing on a quarterly basis. Not unlike you do for sprints or iterations in Kanban. You're just doing this at a higher level, at the feature level. And so that's the release planning. You heard the word big room planning. If you're at a team level and you've got 125 people, they're going to come together. It looks like this. They're going to plan it out. You see along the boards along here are the teams. They've got what they are saying. Hey, here's what I think I can commit to for the next quarter. You see this all around. And you basically are working together, either a day to 2 days, working that out. Okay? Dirty little secret. There's pre-planning involved. They're looking at what, remember I said they may not have been the last 2 or 3 sprints, you may not have been able to get the things that you need to do. I want to plan out those next 5 to 6 sprints. I'm going to spend a little time on this. Ooh, I keep going to that. This is a Kanban. And I had 8 teams. This is a Scrum Master and a test lead. This is a Kanban. These are sprints, that they're committing to, or iterations. At the top, which you can't see, that's their capacity. This is like the 3rd release that they've done, and they know about what they can do with loading their teams. So you've got 6 sprints going on here. There's 3 rows going on here. We've taped this out. This is functional. And these are the features that they're trying to do. Green are the stories underneath. They're typically, we're just trying to get to feature. Get this next row, architecture. Architects are typically having to roll out stuff ahead of time in order for these teams to be able to actually do the functional work. And the bottom piece, which hasn't come through yet, is infrastructure. When are you going to need the next sets of infrastructure to deliver this new functionality? So again, to get into that big room planning, you can see there's a wall back here too. I've got 8 of these walls set up, and they're using it. It's visual. And they're even pulling over here is their backlog to do that. So again, when you can do this, but in large scale, a lot of times the product owners may not be in the same spot, but I bring them here to actually sit with the teams and work on this. But again, Kanban's kind of what I'm hitting on at this point. This is what it looks like in a more beautiful flow. You're going to plan those out, and you can see how they do this. Again, and what you end up coming out with, out of that release planning, and again, this comes from CA, is these are the iterations. Oops, sorry. These are the iterations that they've planned out with the backlog at the feature level, because you don't, especially at that program level, which is where we are, they don't need to see all the stories. They know those teams have been tasked well, and they know how to do those stories. This is at the feature level, but the teams at the team, what I call level 1, have their visibility as well. Jira is another one. We just did this in the last month or so. Just thought I'd show that. They laid out their features this way. So just another view. So you can actually look at it. This is what I'm expecting. Whether you come through without it, every time is a whole other story. But just another view at that. And again, why at that level you need an ALM system. Okay. Last area, portfolios, which is level 3. It's that top level. They're typically working on epics at this level, which drive to features, which drive to stories. So I'll keep going. So again, here it's a little different. It was easier maybe to say this product manager owns, the product owners underneath them. This is a hierarchical. Many times at the epic level, you may have a chief architect. You may have a head of product. You may have a VP in an IT area that are doing this, but you know who they are. These people are the ones that really kind of pull together the business side and the technical side and they're really the ones that are driving this. So this, although the names can change, but they're really responsible for those epics. They're working on the financials of it and driving those down to actually get to the roadmap. So again, these are just different names you can come up with, but I say come up with, this is what they may use: a portfolio owner or an executive, a VP of product, or in the case of a chief architect, or would be some of the words that be at that level. Again, they're typically managing this, or they're managing the roadmap that goes around that. So again, I'll just plot this out all the way. So the epics, again, I've seen it many times, although I like to see it get into the system, because you may only have 6 or 8 epics over 8 months. You can plot them. A lot of times executives will have it in their room or in their conference room, and you can see them plot over, because they're not really moving as fast as a story. They may move every 6 months. That's a good thing. They see it. They know where things are. But the better part of that is if they actually put it in the system, you can see the readout. You can see a % complete, because this really is where a PMO can help somebody move along and say, I know this is, it has 400 stories that are going on, and you're about halfway through. You're about where you need to be on this. So this view is good on a wall, but it's even better in a system. So again, we're just going down the hierarchy. This top level is roadmap, because they're not moving that often, and they're of high value. People have their eye on this pretty easily. Same thing here. So that view is, I'm releasing quarterly. These are typically happening maybe once every 2 or 3 quarters, coming together, or a roadmap item that you're actually going out to release on. I'll just spend a little time here. So you can see here, we talked about that Kanban. If we did a Kanban, and you can see the differences here. Kanban here, it looks a lot different. I'm managing stories. Here I'm managing features. I'm build, to test, to deploy out here. This is a story done. If you get up to the top level, at a portfolio level, they're looking at, hey, I've got a bunch of ideas, i.e. I let that come in, but I got to do business cases. And those business cases may take a week or a month, and it takes a couple people, and it's expensive. And so that, once they decide to build, that drops into this Kanban, and they start tracking it, and that's really the measure. So you can set these Kanbans up at the different levels to manage the work that's going in there. And we'll then talk about it more. Here's an example of that, another example. So I've got an idea, I've got a business case, and I'm limiting how many I can work on, because I don't have so many people who can work on. Just as hard as it is to get the right developer or database person at the low end, people evaluating business cases and talking to stakeholders, talking to customers, the same thing. You've got a constraint in there, and you can manage it that way. And what you can see right here is, once you start building, this is really indicators of the features down below that are starting to come together. So just some additional guidance. 10 minutes, okay? I'm doing okay. So at the portfolio level, it's obviously it's a little more complicated. What we've been showing is this level. If you're working in SAFE, or you're working with a team that is going downward from that end, you can manage a bunch of teams at that level. They have to take into account, though, waterfall things. They have to take into account third-party areas. And so that portfolio area, again, if you go back here, this view, those are starting to come in there, but they may come in differently, and they may manage them differently, because that's what they're tasked with at that portfolio level. So they can, in a safe mode, if they're all operating in safe, they can say, hey, I'm going to drop these in, I'm going to start to look at them, I'm going to light up that area, and things are going swimmingly. But they also have these other areas they may have to do. This may not be safe. They may have, waterfall, they may have governance frameworks that they have to handle, and they need that visibility as well. So I'll show you some of the tools that we use, or I use in managing some of that risk. So if you've got your daily stand-ups that are going on here, and there's problems, remember I said you could escalate to either a Scrum Master, or product owner, architect, or dev and test lead. If there's a problem, you start escalating up. And they may meet 2 to 5 times a week. This may meet daily. And you just keep moving up. If you got a steering committee, this is typically at the program level, 2 to 5 times a month, but they're on call. That's the thing. Yeah, you may meet at this level, but if I've got an issue escalation here that I'm shot, this is, again, I can do this. Again, I'm managing risk all the way up the line. Another example, we looked at this a little earlier. These are epic boards, like we saw before, feature boards. Again, these are Visios I actually built. Like this, yeah, the last one I did here. These are dependency chart on one of the slides I showed before. And again, if you can look at it like this, you can get your head around 20 to 40 items. If it goes off the end of the page, you'll never manage that. Even the complexity of 100 areas or 100 teams working along, it shouldn't have more than these kind of features and these kind of dependencies, or you just probably aren't managing it correctly. So I think making teams go through this is a good thing, that if they can get it onto a single sheet of paper or a single Visio, or it shines up on Rally or version 1 that way, it's a good thing. I think that's it. I did leave a little time. So again, what I'd leave you with after looking at this, go back. We went portfolio and release planning and program all the way down to level 1. So again, the aha moment was for me, for SAFe 4.0, is implement Kanban, and recognize that those are Kanban systems that you can use. In fact, as I've heard from many of you and some of the folks that are the instructors and the like, I'm seeing a lot more people move to that. So you can still manage in a very complex environment with Kanbans along that way, and they're integrated. All right? Thank you very much. Any questions?